Hi, welcome back, guys. This is your friend Deku Fanfics with another fiction. What if Deku followed by a stalker? Now, before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. If you more want video like this, now let's get into the fanfic. He was very tender. She was always babbling. She always made all kinds of strange plans and ideas. Although sometimes, those plans and ideas allowed us to defeat the enemy. The girl, who was between the legs of the purple-haired woman, smiled at her mother, while grabbing a photograph, in which her mother was seen, kissing their father. They looked happy. The woman, the heroine earphone Jack, smiled at the memory of her boyfriend and, likewise, those plans served to pass on information to the League of Villains. I understand that Otosan wanted to be a hero. How did he become a villain then? A girl with green hair and black eyes asked, confused. Midoriya Kyoka stroked her daughter's hair. She could only imagine, more or less, what happened on that occasion, when her husband was left completely alone in the world. How he began to hate heroes, and how he joined the League of Villains. There were some things she didn't know, but yes, there were others, which she managed to remember, almost perfectly, or data that she knew, thanks to her husband's diaries, which it was too difficult for her to order chronologically. But after the death of the latter, she only had the diaries, the photos, the memories, and his little daughter. She opened a diary, which she had named Diary 01. Although it might not be, but it was how her husband grew up, and she believed it was the beginning of everything. For Midoriya Izuku and Midoriya Inko, life had not been easy. Izuku did not awaken his Kosei at the age of 5, and that caused Hisashi to abandon them. But not before trying to kill them both in an arson, only to be stopped, while they began to live, thanks to the state. Inko managed to have a part-time job as a cook in a small restaurant, and thus she was able to earn money, while her son went to school and from school to home. He wanted to be a hero. He wanted to be like All Might. But he wouldn't make it without a Kosei, and even so, he possessed something that few children possessed at his age, a prodigious intelligence. It was not only his intelligence, it was also his capacity for analysis. There were two things that had led him to analyze heroes and villains, writing down as much as he could about them, and sometimes creating certain objects, which could help him to incapacitate a villain, if the situation required it. At the age of 6, he approached a crime scene and gave information to the police, which they had overlooked, leaving them astonished. When they followed this data and clues, provided by the green-haired boy, they managed to find the criminals. Hours later, the Tokyo police chief arrived at the Midoriya house, giving Izuku an award, which was a very pleasant day for the boy. The boy, who managed to impress the police chief, Nakamura Tadashi himself, taught him new detection techniques. A year later, Inko was worried, because her son had not awakened his Kosei. They went to the doctor, and he told them that Izuku was a Mukosei. He was a completely normal child, and that he would not be able to achieve his dreams. That was the first breakup for the boy. The second would take 7 years to arrive. At 9 years old, the boy and his mother were assaulted by a villain who beat Inko, while Izuku hid. While the young man saw him stealing things in the house, he wanted to help his mother. Maybe, perhaps, he could even save her. Everything is fine. Why am I here? Izuku heard and smiled. He was his hero. He was All Might. The hero entered the house and set out to attack the villain, who was stealing by assaulting the property. All Might was strong, but the villain was elusive, and when he thought he finally had him cornered, he was not afraid to attack New Jersey Smash. He shouted, but the villain used his Kosei Kawarami replacement swapped places with Midoriya Inko, and the woman died horribly. All Mighty shouted, turning and attacking again, only to be seriously wounded in the right side. But even so, he was able to finish off that villain. The hero looked to see if there was any trace of the woman's son, knowing of his existence, thanks to the photographs. But Izuku, horrified by what he had just seen, and being only a child, misunderstood things, believed that All Might wished to murder him, and used a secret exit. When the boy made sure that the hero could not find him, he went into hiding. Even the police, who performed the procedure and removed the bodies. Then, he returned to the house. She went to her room and began to cry. The heroes don't save people. They only do it for money and fame, the boy said, heartbroken. I don't know when. But I'm going to kill you. All Might. The emotional pain and trauma caused him to awaken his Kosai. Pain. For the death of his mother, and for having been left alone. Frustration. For not having been able to do anything to help her. Hate. Heroes only did their jobs for money. After a long day at Oridura High School, Midoriya Sakura finally returned home, finding her mother watching a soap opera and wiping tears from her eyes. Okasan, I'm here, Sakura said. Welcome, honey, Kyoka said, smiling, only to see her daughter's bored face. Today they asked us in class what we wanted to be as adults, and all my classmates. They tore the pages and said they wanted to be heroes, said the girl with violet hair, wanting to put aside the idea of heroes. And you, don't you want to be a heroine? His mother asked. For a reason. I've been learning to play the instruments, Mom, Sakura said. It won't be easy, I know, but it won't mean it's impossible. Her mother nodded and took out her husband's diary. Hikari's eyes lit up, and he sat down next to his mother, in the blink of an eye, making her laugh. Reading the journal. The Kosai of Izuku manifested itself before him as a translucent humanoid creature, which had absurdly long arms, ending in claws of 3 fingers and thumb. Its head almost seemed to be some kind of skull, like a green helmet, with 2 pairs of eyes that stood out on each side, as well as a mop of blue hair. The skin was covered with green scales. His shoulders and genitals were covered by a tuft of brown fur. It wasn't easy to figure out how to manifest the creature. But little by little, he learned that an energy ran through his body, which was what the creature was made of, and with that, he could manifest it. It was enough to give an order out loud or just think about it, for it to attack an enemy or object. When it was deactivated or asleep, it manifested itself on the green-haired man's body as aqua-green tattoos. He would learn his other skill almost 6 months after she manifested. He could shapeshift just by thinking about it and depending on the creature imagined by Izuku. Only a couple of tattoos would fade, or they could all fade. It was not difficult for Izuku to get help from the state, managing to get a small apartment and his school rented and paid for. He began to deliver the newspaper, as long as he had some kind of money of his own, and even learned to cook. So he sold chocolate, vanilla, and orange cakes, door to door. Years passed, and Izuku, after many years, saw how toxic his friendship with Katsuki Bakugo was, so he began to ignore him. One of the biggest changes in her life would come one day, when she saw a girl with violet hair being molested by some men, with the intention of raping her. Hey, leave it, Izuku shouted. Look, brat, said one of them, approaching Izuku. Rather retreat, if you don't want to. The subject fell to the ground. When life manifested himself as a panther and a translucent green tiger, both felines threw themselves against the men, making them flee, seeing that they could not hurt them. The violet-haired girl raised her head and saw her savior. Are you okay? Thank you for saving me. And Gyro Kyoka. Nothing. That's what heroes do, isn't it? Izuku said. Although, well, I consider myself only as someone who does what needs to be done. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. Midoriya Izuku. Thank you again, Izuku-san, she said. After a lot of effort and getting information, thanks to Life Eagle and Life Spider, Izuku was able to find the lair of the League of Villains. It was thanks to Life Spider that Izuku got information about them, about each of them, from names, age, addresses, even Kosai. But it was not necessary to blackmail them. All for one was very interested in the information that Izuku could gather about the heroes and villains in his day-to-day. That earned him a full entry to the league. His work was the same: to gather information, and even more importantly, to gather it about the teachers of the UA. How do you explain to your daughter that your father saved you twice, and you became a Yandir who didn't even let her breathe? You were both already in the UA. What happened? Sakura asked. The more time I spent seeing your father, the more I loved him, Kyoka said, then sighed. Your grandmother. My mother, she clarified in case of doubts. The girl only nodded. Well, the stork arrived when she was very young and your grandfather didn't want to. Mom, Sakura said, looking at her. I know how human reproduction is. You don't need to go on with that. The stork. Kyoka blushed. Your grandmother thought your grandfather would like to be with her. But for him it was just fun for one night, and then she began to frequent several places where she should not go, and she had several boyfriends. But they all abandoned her. Kyoka sighed, remembering what her mother and the 3 boyfriends she had had were like in the time she raised her. Finally, a young woman from a good family would arrive, named Kimmy, the heroine spark girl, your grandmother. Now she had a person who loved her from the heart and did not let go of the opportunity to love. Unfortunately, she ended up thinking that all men were equal and that your father was also the same. Leave. That, added to the contempt that your grandmother had for your grandfather and for how much I resemble him physically, made her think of me. I hated, became very insecure, and didn't have a defined personality. But didn't Otosan betray Sensei during the final battle? Sakura asked. Besides, Okasan, you fell in love, didn't you? He weakened Sensei and killed Shigaraki Tamura, his mother specified. But before that, you need to know about our experiences in the UA and how I fell in love with him, don't you think, baby? Her daughter's face lit up as she stroked the little girl's hair while grabbing her husband's diary. I remember. Sensei, also known as All for One, was amazed when Izuku showed him the abilities of his Kosai. Only with his imagination, the tattoos on his body became independent, being able to fulfill all kinds of tasks and change shape. At that moment, they were both in a black room and Sensei was sitting before him, but his face was covered by shadows. Your Kosai would be perfect for what we wish to achieve, and you are connected to them. You can see and hear what the tattoo animals see or hear, Sensei said. However, you're a double agent, so you'll need a second Kosai, and I'll give it to you. A Kosai for a hero and a Kosai for a villain. Choose, Izuku-san. I understand, Izuku said. It may well be in my repertoire. Several monitors lit up around Sensei and Izuku. In each, there was a hero or villain, using his Kosai. It took Izuku a while to discover that those were the Kosai from whom Sensei had snatched others. Or, I can steal it from someone else, Sensei said with a smile. Izuku could get any kind of information for them. Izuku could create anything his imagination wanted. The boy deserved the best of the best. In a mutant Kosai, and there will be no problem, he said ecstatically. Izuku stared at the cameras and stared at a villain's Kosai, making him clench his right fist. Sensei, Izuku said. Life, you have proven to be a Kosai that not only allows me. I can also create smaller animals, even insects, he smiled at him. Who in their right mind will pay attention to a mosquito on the wall or a dragonfly on a board? Sensei nodded. 2 months passed for him, and finally, the big day arrived, to start his path as a spy for the League of Villains. They were all temporarily locked up in a theater, being instructed by President Mike what they would do. They would go to simulacrum cities and earn points, destroying robots. Easy and simple. But the problem was the competition within that place. Izuku managed to destroy his first 2 points by creating a panther 15 minutes after the exam began. Soon, he created a large bird, which grabbed him by the shoulders and rose from the ground to look for more robots. But it was not easy, and, being very annoyed, he had to summon a few ants while looking for more robots until they showed him where they were, thus forcing life to make the ants change shape into lions, bears, elephants, and destroyed the robots. His plan worked, managing to get 54 points. Thanks to the ants and the fact that he could shape his creations, or even cause the ants to sabotage the robots, and he only had to do some mime to accumulate the points. "You," said a voice behind him. Izuku turned, finding a girl with violet hair and whose earlobes were shaped like jack connectors. "You saved me." "It was nothing," Izuku said, smiling at her and helping her to her feet. She looked a little sad. Maybe she had few stitches or something. His saddened gaze turned to fear. "Be careful," he suddenly shouted, resting a hand on Izuku's shoulder and jumping over him, while his jack connectors stabbed a robot, and Izuku destroyed another one that was approaching, cutting it with his blade. "Yes, another 2 points, thank you, this one." Midoriya Izuku. Gyro Kyoka. "Truly, thank you for saving me." I'm still a little. She blushed scared. "Don't worry, no problem." He showed her another smile. "After being saved, your father walked away to continue with his work of destroying robots, and I did it too. I received my message in the morning and your father in the afternoon," the heroine narrated, as soon as she entered the house, while she took off her jacket and mask. "How did Otosan manage to pass himself off as a hero and villain?" she asked curiously. "As far as I understand, her kosai consisted of tattoos all over her body, didn't it?" She showed a photo in which she and Izuku were posing. "Your Otosan used several animals in his hero identity, but as a villain, he would take out a black and red violin and give life, in the form of objects that were supposed to be inanimate," she said. "I'll tell you about your father's villain identity. The Fiddler of Hamelin." Pied Piper, Okasan, not Fiddler, the green-haired woman corrected her. But the woman just smiled and settled down to listen to the newspaper. "I remember. I have managed to get in. The plan has worked perfectly. Now I am in the UA Heroes course, and I will be able to carry out my mission for Sensei. Spy on the masters and search the lives of my companions, potential allies." Izuku saw the school before his eyes. He was wearing the school's regulation uniform, and to his best fortune, he had won a job in a small restaurant, which assured him a source of income. "Good morning, Izuku-san," Kyoka greeted her smiling and a couple of steps away from her. "Good morning, Kyoka-san. Ready?" he asked, and she nodded. Without paying much attention to the girl, she just began to walk towards the classroom, while she, silently and thanks to her jack connectors, stole a handkerchief from him. They entered the living room, and Izuku sat as far away as he could from his terrifying ex-friend, Katsuki Bakugo. "Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to see you comfortable," said a man with long black hair, dressed completely in black, and with bandages around his neck. "I'm Aizawa Shota, your teacher." Izuku wrote down his teacher's name on a separate sheet, while he summoned small mosquitoes, which would go to the other classes, to spy on the kosai of others, and who were his teachers, and although he didn't say anything, sooner or later, he would reveal what superhero he was. He would get the information, and then "Sensei, you are here to become heroes, and for this reason, you will be educated by many of the best in the country. Come on, follow me, we'll do a kosai test. We'll see when you can answer your kosai in a useful way." In different scenarios, everyone followed it to a softball playing field. First, they threw a ball using their kosai, being Yororaka Ochako, who possessed the kosai of gravity, who got the maximum score, infinity. Izuku used something he called spirit. It consisted of life manifesting itself through his body, more or less as a possession, Izuku managing to obtain the characteristics of an animal, in this case, the strength of a gorilla, throwing the softball. Again, he used the gorilla in the strength test. He used the strength of the leopard to be able to run in the 100-meter race, and so on, with all his legs. But Izuku did not know that there was a girl who followed his every move, almost without blinking, and that was none other than Gyro Kyoka. The more skills the green-haired boy had, the more she fell in love, or rather, the more she lost her sanity. For her, the fact that he stood out in that way, in the first class, and that he got the first place, was only a symbol of how great and wonderful Izuku was. It was thanks to the idiot Katsuko Bakugo that Izuku discovered the identity of his master. Izuku came first. Below was Kyoka. The girl smiled. Yes, that's how it should be. Her beloved and future husband would be the greatest hero, and she would always be there for him, always behind, watching his back. Sensei was very pleased with the information that Izuku had gathered about the masters. For being only the first day, Hikari grabbed her father's diary and began to read. Her mother would arrive later, and if she had questions regarding what her father was saying, she would ask them. A new day was beginning at school, and Izuku had to suppress a face and a look full of anger when he heard it. I am walking through the door like a normal person. I didn't need to introduce myself. I knew him quite well. All Might, everyone said, except Izuku, who was shown writing down the information of Lad King and Best Jeanist, more than anything. Their real names, Kosai, and their possible weaknesses. Izuku-kun, Kyoka whispered. At least pretend you're interested in class. My eyes only exist to be dazzled by your beauty. Don't ask them to betray the precious figure of a goddess. The spy quoted in whispers, making the aspiring heroine blush, who could only stammer something intelligible. Well, young people, this is the first session of basic hero training, said the blonde. Today we will have combat training at the same time. He showed a card that said battle, and for this, here they are, their hero uniforms. A part of the wall moved, showing briefcases, with the names of all suits made according to their individualities and the orders sent. Before the start of school, everyone gave an exclamation of surprise and grabbed the briefcase with each one's name on it after changing. In the locker rooms at the end of the hallway, head to the beta battlefield. Yes, sir, they all said. Kyoka, already on the battlefield, was dressed in a white lycra shirt, a special blue jacket, which included sound microchips and blue pants, in order to make use of her earphone jack. They all looked splendid in their costumes. Only Izuku was missing. I'm sorry for the delay, he said, showing himself. He was wearing a long, open black coat, revealing his tattoos covering his torso and arms. Glasses with several magnifying glasses in one lens and gears in the other, along with black pants. They all look great, All Might said. What we're doing today is combat training. We will teach you some martial arts techniques, see which one suits each of you best, and then we will really start with the fights, using your Kosai's behind All Might. There were two more heroes. All three of them were experts in martial arts combat, or hand-to-hand. Desudaguro and Eraserhead. While they were chosen in different groups, they began to train slowly by the three heroes, following the martial arts movements of each of them. Then, they moved on to another group and learned movements from the three heroes. At the end of the day, no one noticed how a bird was flying, with some small paper spheres in its mouth, straight towards the red light district, towards the Paradise Bar. We have to teach this boy how to use email, Tamira thought. He's collected information from a number of professional heroes who serve as teachers and his classmates, Kurogiri said. Tell me, All for One said. Do you have Izuku's villainous identity costume ready? Hi, Sensei, said the villain Yellow. When it comes to light, Not will be remembered as the one who sowed chaos in the country. The next day, they were heroes again, and the time had come to face each other. Villains. Jiro Kyoka and Midoriya Izuku versus heroes. Bakugo Katsuki and Uraraka Ochako. The villains had to protect a papier-mâché bomb until the time ran out, while the heroes had to find it. Izuku and Kyoka entered first, placing the bomb on the third floor, behind a scaffolding, as they had been making arrangements in that training building, while they both prepared to attack, and Izuku summoned a raven, a vulture, and a cobra. Alone, in the thicket of the forest, the human being fears when he cannot see beyond the darkness of his own heart. Kyoka used her jacks to listen when her enemies came up the stairs and caught them. Ochako comes first and brings several objects from the other rooms to throw them at her. Guys, said the crow and the vulture. Thank you, Kyoka, plugging the connectors into your arms. Blast Rush Turbo, Bakugo exclaimed, who was flying towards them with his explosions. But the cobra moved quickly, catching Katsuki and tangling itself in his body, while the crow pecked at his hands. Heartbeat fuzz. Heartbeat shock, Kyoka exclaimed, causing a tremor in the building, only with the beating of his heart amplified, thanks to his arms, which caused Izuku and Ochako to lose their balance, while the cobra transformed into an anaconda, becoming completely entangled in Izuku's body. The vulture and the crow were transformed, one into a bear, which ended up crushing Ochako, and the other into a tiger, which threatened her. The winners are the villains. They stopped their enemies, and neither of the two heroes was interested in rummaging through the room, despite who their rivals were, Momo said. Not only that, Tsuyu said. They didn't try to rummage through the empty floors. They just went in search of their enemies. What do you mean, Frog Girl? Katsuki asked, when the four of them were already downstairs. Zero said it. The revelation would leave the heroes dumbfounded. The bomb was hidden, behind scaffolding in plastic, on the second floor. Izuku and Kyoka took advantage of the fact that the building was being repaired, after a training session by some second graders. Hikari grabbed her father's diary and began to read. Her mother would arrive later, and if she had questions regarding what her father was saying, she would ask them. He smiled as he began to read. So, they're already at that moment, huh? Otasan is a villain and a spy. Does he have orders from All for One? A new day began for everyone. Let no one move if they don't want this woman to die, said the villain, who had a woman trapped, while the father kept his daughter away and had a hand on fire. The villain in question called himself Oni and had a kosei of transfiguration. He was tall and muscular. Well, now I want you. The guy flew away when he was tackled by a black buffalo. Cruelty has a human heart and envy a human face. Terror takes on a divine human form and secrecy wears human clothes. Izuku quoted William Black, who had had life dress him in a copy of his hero's costume, which was stored in the Yua and his glasses, which he always carried in his backpack. Let them go and perhaps Kami will be merciful to you, for I will not be. Do you want to die, brat? Asked the villain, undeterred. Is this how you want to spend your last minutes in this world? Izuku asked. The villain lunged at him, aiming to catch him. But the tattoos flashed and a buffalo formed of black ink appeared, lunging at the villain, who could only open his eyes before being hit. The heroes were approaching. A vulture appeared. Time to go, said the bird. Good boy, called the hero to Sudagoro. What do you call yourself? You can call me Black King, or I. The vulture was encased in a sphere, and soon was transformed into a gigantic version of himself. While Izuku climbed on his back, and the bird took off, taking him to the UA, running over a bunch of annoying reporters, so he couldn't save Uraraka, nor Kyoka or Koji, from being approached by reporters. Izuku arrived in the classroom when the last students were arriving. Mizo, Toru, and Kyoka, who came out from behind a wall after looking at Izuku for a few minutes. Welcome in today's class. A message arrived on Izuku's cell phone, who stopped paying attention to what Aizawa was saying. You are a hero and our spy, only our spy. Postscript. Sensei is very happy with your heroic performance today and with the information you have passed on to us. Keep it up. With all might, myself and a third teacher. Now, he left them with Midnight, who gives them modern art. We know, said a smiling and good-humored Ijiro. Aizawa got into her sleeping bag, while Midnight made Izuku and Mizo come to the front, giving them some bathing shorts and herself took off her clothes, remaining in bathing suits, while the others painted them on some canvases that she gave them. Later, they had mathematics with ectoplasm and modern literature with Cementos. Midoriya, are you paying attention? Cementos called. Please read paragraph 12. Izuku stood up and grabbed the book. Follow God's teachings and receive his blessings. And then the oceans will be plentiful again, and the storms will subside. Kyoka smiled and applauded. Soon, the rest of the class also cheered him for keeping calm in the class. Perfect, Midoriya, said Cementos. In the last hours of the day, Aizawa took them outside to a bus. After telling them that they were going to the USG, everyone was excited and expectant. But then, their excitement went down the drain. When they arrived at the USG, oddity of events J more expected. Meeting the superheroine. Question 13. With Aizawa you learned the limit of your Kosei, All Might. You learned what your Kosei could do against others, and with me, you will learn that your Kosei can also save lives, said 13. Everyone nodded. We'll start by choosing the rescuers and the wounded. Then it goes. The lights exploded and the fountain failed. A portal appeared and, before the heroes and the students, hundreds of villains appeared, being guided by a blue-haired subject, with black clothes and many hands on his body. On this day, you will fall, All Might. Everyone stay behind. This is a real villainous attack, Aizawa warned. And we are real students training to be heroes, Idro said, strengthening his arms. And although a cruel tyrant oppresses the truth, and your avarice, clothed in a vain name, turns justice into buying and selling. Izuku quoted, almost from memory, it's written. No one understood why he said such words, until hundreds of wild animals, such as lions, tigers, pumas and birds, such as crows, vultures and eagles, went against the villains. Ijiro and Bakugo began to attack the villains. Kyoka attacked a villain, who was looking to attack Izuku from behind. But he began to fight the villains, who began to surround him, and the rocker. Takoyami and Tsuyu made a good team fighting together, as well as Rikido and Miso. Ochako went to the landslides area and threw rocks at the villains, while Minoru threw his spheres from his head, hitting the villains among them. Attack, Namu! The subject ordered his hands, while the beast lunged at the heroes, but Izuku made all his animals return to him, while sighing and his hair stood on end. Life. Time for the main performance, Izuku said. Yes, my lord, said a female voice. But no one knew where it came from. Izuku's hair changed color. It stopped being black with green tips, to white with salmon-colored tips. The tattoos on his body peeled off, giving shape to a bipedal and very tall creature with green skin. He wore what appeared to be a gray shirt, made of fur, on his shoulders, and as a loincloth, he wore brown feathers. His head was covered by the skull of an unknown creature, and he had elongated blue hair, which fell behind his shoulders. It was almost 4 times taller than Izuku and attacked Namu. But some people such as Kyoka, Takoyami or Tsuyu noticed that the creature was connected to Izuku by thin threads of green energy, and the creature replicated the movements that Izuku made live, who attacked the subject with his hands on his body. Life was beating Namu up, while Kyoka whipped Namu, distracting him or giving him loud sonic shocks, while Izuku made sure not to be touched by the subject with his hand on the face, which he hit hard. Izuku was about to pierce the bluish-haired subject's chest, but the portal man saved the other, while Namu's heart was crushed by life and the last villains, defeated by Aizawa and 13. You discovered that Namu was defective, the portal man, Kurogiri, would think hours later, reviewing Izuku's notes. Exactly, Izuku said, behind him. This attack was stupid. That thing, Namu, he might as well have killed all of us, and not just All Might. Kurogiri looked at him worriedly, but said nothing. He let Izuku go. He would have to communicate to Sensei the discovery of the young man with black-green hair. Oto-san, you're interesting. Very interesting, said a smiling Hikari to herself. He read something on a page, something that was almost like the title of an episode of some TV series, and he had a drop behind his head. And then he rested his hand on his forehead. There is Oto-san. I am sorry for all that you suffered because of Okasan. Then, a doubt settled in her mind. Did Okasan rape Oto-san, or was I conceived because of the love they had for each other? They all trained, for almost a month, seeking to improve and take their kosai to the greatest limits. Perfect, thought Izuku. Not only can I manifest the kosai as sentient animals, but I can also force life not to transfer its consciousness and give it forms of objects that would have to be inanimate. It was perfect. Although life did not know what the definitions of such as good and evil were, it only lived and existed by and for Izuku. Although he could think and so on, he lacked real decision-making. The real limits of tattoo were present, as it could not only give life to animals, but could also create weapons. But they had a maximum duration of 10 minutes. In addition, tattoo could manifest feathers or thorns, which caused paralysis in the enemy. When the day of the festival arrived, the hero courses, they came face to face with the support, business and general studies course. They were truly the opponent's prey. The first test was an obstacle course, although the first phase seemed to be just a race. Everyone would have to run down a hallway, but Izuku employed life, creating his vulture. Inko. The vulture was the protector in various mythologies, and his had shown that same desire to protect him. What better than to bear his mother's name? Inko had a monumental size, grabbing Izuku by the shoulders and lifting him into the air. While the other students are crossing the path of the hallway, Midoriya Izuku is using her vulture, called Inko, to solve the problem of traffic jam, descending on the main road. Present, Mike said. Villains should be careful when the hero can think of solving a problem of this type, Aizawa said. But it seems that Midoriya Izuku's lover, Jiro Kyoka, is following him closely. Izuku saw a smiling Kyoka, holding onto one of his legs, with her connectors. Meanwhile, Todoroki Shoto seems to be in the lead in the competition, perhaps get third place, considering how they are being surpassed by this peerless duo. Shoto left them all frozen, only to be hit by several of the class, but in addition to other classes, which for him was unexpected. Soon, he knocked down the largest of the robot's 0 points that appeared before him, making the test even more difficult. But quickly the robots were outplayed. Bakugo, using a large explosion which he called stun grenade, was able to pierce a robot and pass through the middle, being closely followed by Tsuyu, whom he tried to attack with a small explosion. But the frog girl stopped, let the explosion pass, and then kicked the boy, while Hanta was even on top of her. When he swayed with his ribbons, they soon arrived at the fall, where Tsuyu took the lead, to everyone's amazement, by being able to move between the ropes, with almost no problem. In an attempt to make it cool, Tenya slid down the tightrope, but with a rather laughable posture. Mei used her gadgets, such as hooks and turbine boots. The first place belongs to Midoriya Izuku, said Present Mike. The second place belongs to Jiro Kyoka, and the third place belongs to Todoroki Shoto. The green-haired boy and the lilac-haired girl, who was hugging a blushing Izuku, turned their gaze to Shoto, who was staring at the stands. When they turned their gaze, they found a man with hair and beard made of fire. Eldiver, Izuku whispered. My father, Shoto said. You want to get over it? Kyoka asked. I want to show you. He clenched his right fist, that I don't need my flames to be at his level. I see, Izuku said, before looking in another direction. There you are, Izuku thought, while life appeared behind him, as if he were dark shadow. Now, the cavalry battle is coming, and the points will be distributed, according to the arrival of each group, Midnight said, smiling. First place gets 1 million points, second place gets 500,000, third place gets 250,000. Izuku's team was formed by Kyoka, Mei and Fumikage, being that they carried Kyoka, who wore the bands of the group on his head. But everything was planned by Izuku to free life, in her real form, and that she would disperse her feathers, causing paralysis in as many rivals as possible, and then, Dark Shadow, he will steal their bandanas, before continuing on his way. Deku, you damn bastard, Bakugo shouted, while his group went against Izuku's. Bakugo, Ijiro, Mina, and Hanta went to them. Kyoka and Mei stepped aside. While Bakugo's team was affected by Tetsutetsu's Kosai, because Juzo could create quicksand, in which most of the teams were trapped. But thanks to the work of Dark Shadow and a bird-shaped life, they were able to escape from that entanglement, getting more bandanas, being first and the team of that lilac-haired boy Shinzo. He was second. After several teams were eliminated, the third and best test from the point of view of many finally arrived. The elimination matches. The first fight has arrived. Bakugo Katsuki versus Nido Momoa. The lion would be cunning if he took advice from the fox, Izuku quoted. Bakugo looked at him. I think he feels sure of himself. Very confident. Bakugo nodded and continued towards the battlefield. Without waiting, Bakugo threw himself at Nido, then stretched out his right arm. But Nido deflected Bakugo's hand and stretched out his right arm, receiving an explosion in the face, making him retreat. He asked himself, surprised. Izuku began to write in his notebook various observations, their names, Kosais, and how he would divert them, or how he would seek to take advantage. Bakugo again went on the attack, ducking when the explosion passed over his head, only to receive another in the face and fall to the ground. He rolled to avoid being stepped on and hit him with a kick in the side, causing the blonde to hold his side painfully, before receiving an explosion in that same part and being thrown double light. He said, smiling. I create an explosion within another. Your Kosai allows you to copy someone else's Kosai. But how much? He asked, as he clasped his hands next to his waist, and his rival did the same, while smiling at him. Few saw, as Katsuki's golden explosions turned green, before launching himself at his enemy, who stretched out his hands to blow up the red-eyed boy. But Bakugo stepped by and punched his enemy in the stomach. Surprise, his rival received a fist in the face, and then an explosion in the middle of the flight. A new explosion affected him, sending him flying off the battlefield. The winner is Katsuki Bakugo, said Present Mike. He's come up with something I haven't seen him do since the beginning of his education. A plan, Aizawa said. The next match is between Midoriya Izuku of the A1 class versus Kendo Itsuna of the B1 class, Present Mike said. Izuku arrived on the battlefield and pointed upwards, while Inko and his Raven Griffin were already circling in the heights. I must be careful with them, Kendo thought, looking at them, before turning her gaze to ground level and having to jump, lest she be scratched by a panther. Griffin, Inko, and Shadow on the battlefield, Izuku said. Of course not, said the orange-haired girl. We're in for a big fight, from the two of them, don't you think, Eraserhead? I think so, Present Mike, Eraserhead said. And to help us comment, here's the teacher from Class 1B, Vlad King. Thank you for having me, guys, the man said. While Midoriya-sen attacks from a distance, thanks to life, Itsuna attacks at close range. It is a combat of attrition. Who will fall first? Asked Present Mike. Everyone was looking at the stands. The crow was gone. Now Izuku was accompanied by a lion. Itsuna was at a disadvantage, but she wouldn't give up. She smiled and kicked. Kendo's foot became oversized, but Izuku only had to back away to dodge her opponent's kick. Kendo backed away when the lion attacked her. I need to get closer, but it will be practically impossible, Kendo thought, annoyed, as she dodged the lion's attempts to make mincemeat of her, only to notice that the lion was throwing hairs like needles against her. Kendo now knew that he needed to get closer to his rival, so not only did he retreat, but he began to dodge and approach Izuku, who, seeing his plan, placed a hand on the ground and summoned a lizard. How many animals can you summon? He wondered, as he dodged again. You know, honey, his mother said, smiling, after serving dinner. Your father always proved to be more of a strategist than a warrior. Yes, he's showing that in this diary, about the fight against Battle Fist, Hikari said, smiling. That fight, he showed the kind of hero Izuku would be, and his mother's eyes darkened. What happened next? It showed how your father felt. Could he ever get revenge on All Might? Asked the red-haired woman, while making her ponytail. He succeeded. Kendo managed to dodge the lizard's bite and grabbed the vulture, and then grabbed the lizard, only to let out a scream. When the lion's claws scratched his back, Izuku attacked, hitting him on the nose with the palm of his hand, causing her to bleed from her nose, and then getting her to let go of her fellow animals, which bit or pecked her, just as Izuku threw her to the ground and put her in a headlock, leading her to surrender. The winner is Midoriya Izuku, from Class A, said Present Mike. Good job, Midoriya-san. You can certainly be the symbol of peace someday, All Might said, angering Izuku. Shiozaki Ibara versus Kaminari Denki, said Aizawa, after a silence and an awkward situation had arisen because of Present Mike. Shiozaki Ibara had been nicknamed Gaia's hitman behind her back, as her vines made her dangerous, and she always advocated against logging and deforestation in general. Wan Hyaku Man Boruto. Million volts, the blonde exclaimed, releasing his electric shock. Hogo. Protection, Ibara exclaimed, as her hair fell from her head and formed a shield. Restriction, Ibara's hair already detached, behaved as if it came to life, like tentacles. They tied Denki. The winner is Shiozaki Ibara. But there was another reason, to call her murderer. I'm not interested. I just want to focus on my career as a heroine. Everyone heard perfectly how the girl had just broken Denki's heart by her cold tone when she spoke. From the support course, Hatsume verses from the hero course, Ida Tenya, the woman said. For everyone, Izuku was studying opponents and writing about them, to know what countermeasures to use, something they had already seen him do, so it was normal. Whether they admitted it, Kyoka, Momo, Ijiro, or not Bakugo, Izuku was the greatest strategist of the A1 class. But in reality, he was doing just what the league had asked him to do. Write about students and teachers. Ida lunged at Mei, but she extended a pair of canes from her jetpack, which tripped her rival. Between the jetpack backpack, her hovercraft-equipped boots, and a net launcher, Mei not only demonstrated her items, but was able to defeat someone from the hero course like Tenya with almost no problems. The next match is between Aoyama Yuga versus Ashido Mina, said Present Mike. Acid versus laser. Izuku muttered. Mina-chan can even slide and Aoyama needs to rest before a second shot. Timing will be key, but I think Mina has won the fight on the air. Won't you give a poem sentence? Asked a smiling Tsuyu. Izuku took out a book, apparently opened it on a random page, but then closed it. In this fight, timing is key. Aoyama must defeat her in less than a second or he'll suffer from his stomach, Kyoka said with a disgusted face. Aoyama attacks from a distance. Mina will need to get close to him. Force hand-to-hand combat if he wants to win. As I said, time is the key, Izuku said. The laser shot off, but Mina nimbly jumped to dodge it and began to slide into his acid. Mina plays with him. It slides in different directions and dodges it at just the right moment. She's waiting for him to attack him for more than a second, so that his stomach will decompose and she can take the win, Izuku said. Mina threw a ball of acid, while bending down and throwing a couple more acidic spheres, which were avoided by the blonde. Aoyama fired, but when the shot was over, Mina destroyed his belt, throwing acid at him, and then hit him on the chin. The winner is Ashido Mina, said Present Mike. Chronicle of a Triumph Foretold, Izuku said. Momo-chan versus the best bat chicken in the world, said Mina smiling, making Tsuyu want to kill her. Fumigage was hers, not Mina's. Everyone turned to Izuku, while a panther arrived and handed out a couple of books. Thank you, Shadow, he said, grabbing the books and opening them. Dark shadow is best used on a day like today. A day like today? Asked Rikito. Sunny. If there were rain clouds, perhaps he could still control it. But, for example, if it were to get dark, or if a solar eclipse occurred. Dark Shadow would become. Savage, Tsuyu said. Dark Shadow is a female entity who wants to do everything she can for Fumikage. That's why she doesn't like me to be with him. Because she knows that I can give him something that she can't. Love? He asked. Children. Dark wants. Rape him? Tsuyu said. Everyone was left with horrified faces, shaking their heads, wanting to forget the images that were beginning to form in their minds of a Fumikage Shotaken with the pants. Fortunately, for me, life sees me as his son, Izuku said, blushing and worried that life might start thinking with Dark Shadow. I do create a simple shield that doesn't take time and block its first attack. Momo thought. First a shield, I'll need the time to create a weapon. A crossbow, perhaps. Dark Shadow launched himself against Momo, who created a shield, protecting himself from Dark Shadow's violent attacks, while Takoyami began to gather forces to force her away from Momo when everything became untenable, but it was not necessary. Dark Shadow, at one point, moved away from Momo, leaving her confused, but giving her time to create a weapon. Takoyami Fumikage is the winner. Yaoyorozu Momo is off limits, Midnight said, while the black-haired woman was left with a face reminiscent of Munch's painting. She must feel frustrated. She lost only with her rival's pushes, Mashiro said. Kirishima Ijiro versus Tetsutetsu, Midnight said. Both competitors arrived on the battlefield, while Momo sat next to Izuku and looked at him with a look of despair. Did I ever have a chance? The black-haired woman asked. Dodge and get close, Izuku said. Neither life nor Dark Shadow are good for attacking from very close. Invading their personal space might have been your only chance. Ijiro and Tetsutetsu's combat was not only at close range and demonstrating their martial arts knowledge, but focused on how much damage they could withstand. If a normal punch had a 10 pain, then in this case, it would be a 7, and in the case of Ijiro, who was more like a rock, he could keep it. But the pain was a 6, he felt it more. The key was to dodge their opponent and counterattack, with force and in a single point. Or so they both thought, until they received a blow to the chin. They were synchronized. At that moment, Ijiro saw him. He caught Tetsutetsu by his right arm, and then spun him, as if he were a top. He kicked him and Tetsutetsu could not get back into battle pose, nor could he get his feet to stabilize, which Ijiro used to give him blow after blow. But Tetsutetsu grabbed Ijiro by the arm, and they both lost their balance, falling off the battlefield, both ending up disqualified. The next fight would be difficult for one side, and for the other side, it would be very easy. The next fight will be between Uraraka Ochako versus Katsuki Bakugo, announced Present Mike. By God, this will end very badly, thought a frightened Mina. I'm afraid so. Bakugo is obviously not going to stop, just because his rival is a girl, said a frightened Kyoka, who squeezed Izuku's hand. Bakugo always attacks with his right hand. She will need to get close to him and invade his personal space, Izuku said. Bakugo launched his explosion, but he never expected the explosion to be redirected at him, only managing to emit a "What is this?" before being sent back. Interesting. Shall we go on? She asked, feeling more confident and touching the tiles, before dodging an explosion, and Bakugo began to destroy everything around him, blowing up tiles and increasing the smoke present. And now where? Bakugo saw a shadow in the smoke and attacked. But it was only his rival's jacket. Although the girl tried to attack him from behind, he received her with an explosion, making her scream in pain and fall backwards. Uraraka did not give up and applauded. Instantly, hundreds of pieces of the tiles destroyed by Bakugo came towards him, hitting or cutting him, causing his blood to jump. But Bakugo attacked with a new explosion, which was contained by Uraraka. In the end, both were thrown in opposite directions and fell unconscious. It's a draw, said Present Mike, while everyone cheered the two competitors. Ida Tenya vs. Todoroki Shoto. Ida attacked Shoto head-on, who threw cold air at him, creating a fog bank. But a kick from his opponent undid the fog layer and allowed Ida to throw a fist, which was caught by Shoto, and the black-haired man was sent flying by a new blast of cold. The boy with glasses wondered. Book #543 of Midoriya. In it you have our Kosei and its weaknesses. I'm just implementing it, said the boy with white and red hair, smiling. We'll see that, said Ida defiantly and running towards his rival, and then began to turn around him. Seeing this, Shoto joined his hands, while putting Midoriya's Plan 34 in motion. Sonic kick, sonic kick. Warm pressurized water were Shoto's words, as he generated water from his hands, as he held his right wrist with his left hand, while allowing the water to come out in large jets, preventing Ida from moving at will, because the water made him go backwards, to finally be hit by a ball of ice, which mutated and left him inside a sphere of ice. The winner is Todoroki Shoto, being our second winner. The third is Katsuki Bakugo, and finally, the fight that will decide the first place. Takoyami Fumikage vs. Midoriya Izuku. Go, Dark Shadow, Takoyami exclaimed, letting his companion go. Life, let's use that, said Izuku, while Life appeared and put his opponent in a lock, making him fall to the ground. That astonished more than one. Izuku leapt over both creatures, starting the green-haired boy and the crow in hand-to-hand combat, while Life continued to subdue his rival, who could not be spared in any way. The tattoos lit up. They seemed to be striving to do so, and from Life's back, a panther emerged, tackling Takoyami, who now knew he could not win. I give up, he said, and finally, Life released Dark Shadow, while the black creature returned to its master, very upset. The first place winner is Midoriya Izuku, said Midnight. Everyone has fought very well, but it is the decision of the judges, who wins the medals, and any of you could have won, and to deliver the medals, here is the best. I brought the medals of everyone. After speaking in unison, the medals were presented to the 3 students of Class A, only for an explosion to be heard and a subject dressed in a long white sleeveless trench coat, a black shirt and black pants, and a helmet reminiscent of a dragon, which only covered his eyes and nose. The stranger, who was flying in the skies, threw the crash onomatopoeia from his hand, causing the stadium's bleachers to be cut off, then clasped his hands together and brought up the kaboom onomatopoeia, throwing it against the stadium, with no one able to use any kosei to prevent the explosion. Hand over the supervillain who calls himself Animal King. I know he's here. Hand him over and no one will be hurt, said the subject. The professionals got down to work. Professors, get the civilians out of here. All the professionals, help in battle, All Mighty ordered, as he threw himself at the subject. Michigan smash, the hero exclaimed. The guy waited patiently for All Might to approach him, and when the blonde stretched out his hand, the villain opened it. Boing! The villain exclaimed, while All Might sent his fist, only to fly away. Eraserhead stared at him and caught him with his webs, but he smiled and took a knife from each pocket, proceeding to cut the fabrics, astonishing his opponent. I'm sorry, Eraserhead. I have no intention of harming you. I'm just going to take care of the subject before he causes an evil that we can't stop. Both went head-on, but the supposed hero still had the knives in his hands and hurt the hero. Cementos attempted to imprison him, but he went faster, escaping from the prison before a wall could be formed. Everyone was amazed at how All Might's attacks did not hurt the subject, nor how Eraserhead ended up being wounded in the tendons or how Cementos was dodged, ending up hindering the movement of his companions, who could not do what they wanted because that subject had studied his movements. The clones of ectoplasm were easily disabled by that subject, either with his onomatopoeias or with his razors. Mount Lady was easily outmatched, only with several explosions turning the ground into a minefield, and thus making it difficult for several heroes to work, until 13 generated a black hole and absorbed the onomatopoeia of explosions. Since I see that they are not going to deliver him, he murmured with a dark look on his face, before the onomatopoeia zaz and crash made an appearance, and they were all sent flying, being saved by hundreds of hands, coming from Takoyami and Midoriya, both in their hero uniforms. Animal King, the one who joined the League of Villains because of revenge against a hero who was only doing his job. If the fool persists in his foolishness, he will become wise, Izuku quoted, causing a grimace of annoyance to appear on his enemy's face. Killing my mother, was it All Might's job? Asked Izuku, and then sighed and took out his book. Everyone was amazed at such information. Why would the symbol of peace murder a woman? Or was it the boy's mother, a delinquent? I know what everyone is thinking, but no. The boy's mother was a civilian who was involved in my fight against the villain Houdini, said the hero, clenching his right fist in anger and frustration as he saw Takoyami and Izuku facing the enemy, using dark shadow and life to attack from a distance. Houdini could be replaced with any object and put young Midoriya's mother on the path of my United States of Smash. We are in time to save the young man, Toshinori, Nezu said. Die, he shouted. Kaboom, he exclaimed, while an onomatopoeia of immense sound was coming towards him. Life. Give me wings, Izuku ordered, while his companion did so, while he flew towards the onomatopoeia, flapping his wings, causing the onomatopoeia to come out in the opposite direction, hitting the subject and creating a large column of smoke, before landing and making a pair of lions appear, which threw themselves at the subject. Both lions fell, but a pair of tigers came out from the ground and bit the subject, while scratching him, giving Izuku time to summon a pair of gauntlets, before throwing himself at his enemy, while life granting Izuku the strength of a gorilla. And before the subject could do anything, Izuku beat him to death, but stopped at the last second, which showed the director that the boy was in time to change. Stop, Eldiver, Nezu said, stopping the fire hero, while Izuku changed his animal spirit from gorilla to dragon. I am sorry for what my actions caused, Midoriya shonen. He truly sounded and looked ashamed. You are sincerely sorry, Izuku, Life said. Thank you. Thank you for accepting that you are human and that you made a mistake, Izuku said, before hitting him in the side, making him lose his transformation. The hero smiled. Do you want to go on, Animal King? The hero asked, looking at the boy. The eagle never wasted more time than when he followed the advice of the raven, he quoted. I will give you the information I have about the League of Villains. Thank you, young Midoriya, said Principal Nezu. You have just acted like a hero by not letting yourself be carried away by revenge and allowing justice to work on All Might. This young man is an example to follow for all his companions, and do not give up, young Midoriya. Even if the faces of your companions reflect anger or discomfort at your presence and your newly revealed role as an informant of the League of Villains. Thank you for continuing to trust my word, Director Sama. I conclude this event. Everyone, go to your homes, Nezu ordered. Izuku got out as fast as he could. Using the speed of the leopard, he didn't want to talk to anyone. Once he was far away, he felt the presence of Kurogiri, whom he hit with the force of the gorilla on his collar, and then injected him with the scorpion's venom, because his body became palpable without that necklace. Pay. You will pay for having betrayed the League. Izuku, Kurogiri muttered from the ground, as a spider appeared beside Izuku and bit his enemy. Let them come. They will never be able to stop me. Izuku continued on his way, meeting a smiling Kyoka, who kissed him on the lips, feeling proud that her boyfriend left that hatred towards All Might, and now dedicated himself to being 100% a hero.